In today's video, we're going to be having a look at what will happen if you consume honey on your carnivore diet. We're first going to look at how honey is made and answer the question, is honey actually carnivore? And then we're going to look at the makeup of honey, in particular the defense chemicals that it contains and how the macronutrient profile that it has will affect your results on carnivore. And then we're going to discuss how the sugars that it contains will affect you, whether or not it'll kick you out of ketosis, and how it affects your hunger signaling. And then finally, we'll look at how honey nowadays has been contaminated by the pesticides sprayed on crops, and we'll discuss something known as glycation and how it causes inflammation and aging. How is honey made and is it carnivore? The first step to making honey is bees will land on flowers and gather the nectar. From there, it'll go into their stomachs where their enzymes will start to break down the nectar. They then vomit it back up and begin a process where they go around essentially vomiting this nectar into one another's mouths. Now, the reason for this is that each bee basically has its turn at adding more digestive enzymes to break the nectar down and turn it into honey. During this process, they turn the more complex sugars found in the nectar into fructose. So when you hear people like Dr. Ken Berry and Anthony Chaffee calling honey bee vomit, it quite literally is that. Honey is made by bees for bees. They make honey so when they run out of food, they still have something to eat. So what is the makeup of honey? Well, it's essentially nectar that's had its carbohydrates changed from, like I said, more complex carbohydrates into fructose. Now, after bees have finished the process where they vomit it into each other's mouths and they put it into the honeycomb, they begin a process where they essentially just flap their wings, which dries the honey out, which drastically reduces the water content in honey and helps it last a long time. Now, as we've just talked about, honey is essentially nectar. So what happens is that honey is full of defense chemicals. Now, the effects of these defense chemicals may be mitigated in some way due to the enzymatic processes that the bees have put it through. However, they are still there. Now, which defense chemicals are present in which honey? Well, it all depends on the type of plant that the bees got the pollen and nectar from. However, let's discuss two compounds that have been found in substances of honey. The first we're going to talk about is tannins. Now, tannins are present in many vegetables, but they're also present in many flowers. How tannins work is they bind to proteins and minerals and prevent their absorption. They also irritate our gut, which can cause inflammation. Now, tannins by themselves have a very bitter taste, and as we all know, when something tastes bitter, it's our taste buds' way of saying to us, don't eat this. The next defense chemical we're going to discuss is pyrrolizidine alkaloids, also known as PAs. The problem with PAs is when they're metabolized in our liver, they turn to something known as pyrrole metabolites, which are highly toxic to us. Now, this can cause direct damage to our liver cells as well as our DNA itself. Now, this doesn't mean having a small amount of honey is going to damage your DNA. However, in substantial quantities, this can happen. In fact, many countries have established maximum legal limits for the amount of PAs that can be in a food. Essentially, when you're having honey, you're basically having a plant, and therefore, it's obviously going to have some defense compounds. Now we're going to look at the macronutrient breakdown of honey. Now, honey is very high in both glucose and fructose. But what does this mean? Well, for starters, when you're on the carnivore diet, assuming you're eating enough fat in comparison to the amount of protein you're having, you will be in a state of ketosis. Now, ketosis is very beneficial to us. There are so many benefits to ketosis. Most people report that they have less anxiety, better brain function, they feel more energized, keeps your blood sugar levels stable, and because your body's running on ketones, it's also protein sparing. Ketosis is a very good thing. However, when we have carbohydrates, it can kick us out of ketosis. For some people, all you need is 20 to 30 grams of carbohydrates to be kicked out of the state. And since honey is basically just sugar syrup, you don't actually need that much honey to be out of ketosis. Now, because of the carbohydrates, it's also going to mess with our hunger signaling. One of the ways it's going to do this is it's going to cause blood sugar fluctuations. Whenever you eat carbohydrates, your blood sugar levels spike very high. And so what happens with this is that they crash back down, but they don't stop at their baseline. They go below their baseline. And in this state, your body literally thinks it's dying, and that's why people get super hangry a few hours after eating carbohydrates, as well as the fact that it's also going to mess with something known as leptin. Now, leptin is essentially a hormone excreted by your fat cells that tells your body to stop eating, you're full, and you don't need anything else to eat. However, as soon as we have carbohydrates, our blood sugar levels spike, and therefore our insulin levels spike to bring the carbohydrates back down, and this insulin blocks the leptin signaling. This is one of the reasons why a zero carbohydrate diet is so effective. You just don't get hungry. There are so many anecdotes of people who have been on carnivore for an extended period of time, they go down the fruit and honey rabbit hole and they gain a lot of weight. Now, the next problem with honey is that it's contaminated with pesticides. Due to agriculture nowadays, essentially every crop is just doused in pesticides. Now, on screen right now, you can see the ingredients in these pesticides. You tell me, is that something you want to be consuming? There have been many studies that have taken samples of honey and they've found it contains high levels of this pesticide. In fact, in some studies, they've found the amount of pesticides in the honey exceeds legal limits in some nations. Now, the reason for this is, like I said, glyphosate is just sprayed on everything. So when bees land on plants, they come in contact with the stuff and it ends up in their honey. Now, the next problem with honey is again from the carbohydrate content it has. When you consume carbohydrates, they break down to sugars and it results in something known as glycation. Glycation is a process where sugar molecules like fructose and glucose bind to proteins or fats, and it results in something known as advanced glycation end products, also known as AGEs. Now, AGEs are not a good thing. They cause cellular damage, inflammation, and they even break down the collagen and elastin in our bodies, which causes us to have more wrinkles and age faster. And what's interesting to note is that fructose, which as we saw earlier is very high in honey, is 10 times more glycating than glucose. So yeah, this is really not ideal. So in summary, honey is not carnivore. It's basically pollen bee vomit, and the sugar in it is going to cause a number of issues, including kicking you out of ketosis and messing with your hunger signaling, as well as the glycation. And then finally, we had the pesticides, which, as we know, we don't want to be consuming. So that concludes today's video. If you're unsure on whether or not you should consume honey on the carnivore diet, I hope this answers that question. If you enjoyed this video and you want to see more of my content, consider subscribing down below. It's completely free and it means you'll see more videos like this. On screen right now are a few videos of mine that YouTube reckons you'll like. So if they've got it right, click that button. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next time.